Hi, folks. Welcome back. Good to have everybody with Jennifer on the left, Michelle Anais Morgan on the right. We got some stuff to look at tonight. We're going to have some fun. Thanks, Michelle, for doing this. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And we learned prior to the show that Jennifer and Michelle used to shop at the same stores because they both live in Connecticut. So they're gonna meet up at a Target. They're gonna meet up at a Target, I think, in the.
We probably live 12 miles apart or so.
Yeah, if that. In fact, I'm probably going to be over in your neighborhood tomorrow, I think. So
there we go.
That's funny.
Right. Meeting in the home goods department. That's what we're doing.
Totally.
Yes.
At Joann's.
All right, so we've got all kinds of Michelle photos. I think there's 15 of them or so to look at tonight, so we're going to have a great time. Mutually Assured Deconstruction is Michelle's website. Check that out. Listen to the podcast this past Sunday to get all the scoop, and check out her artwork. It is really fun. Ruth Norbury, another one, this Sunday will be our guest. Gothic Decay is her website, gothicdecay.com. Whole nother approach to needle arts and equally unique. So be ready for that on Sunday. Avlia chart winners from last week, Ann McSweeney, Heather Cowan, and Judy Stone. So Ann McSweeney, Heather Cowan, Judy Stone, they've not been mailed yet. I apologize for that. They will probably go out tomorrow. I'm going to mail them Monday. Monday was a holiday for the thing. And then Tuesday, I literally went to the post office myself, because usually Margo mails them, to the post office at 2 o'clock in the afternoon to be greeted by a sign, "We're on lunch break from 1:30 to 2:30. You got to be kidding me. And I had to go to another thing that took till their closing time. So we'll get them in the mail tomorrow to Ann, Heather, and Judy. Sorry about that, but life is kind of one of those things. So anyway, no drawing tonight, and Inherited wants to ask a nerd question. Fire it off.
It'll take a second.
Yeah, I know.
Some of our post offices here in Connecticut close at 2.
Oh, that's helpful. Yeah.
Some of the smaller ones, yeah.
Yeah. So.
Since the pandemic,
Yeah.
It's been rough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Waiting for the nerd question, then we're going to talk to Michelle. Yeah. Inherited's finger pecking her way through the nerd question. No, we'll fit it in somewhere. Okay, so if you haven't listened to Michelle, the podcast we did Sunday with Michelle, Art, do I have an Apple Watch? Yes. SE. Michelle has the what?
I don't know. It's old.
One of those, yeah. Yeah, it's one of those you buy it and then you just use it till it dies.
I just use it till it dies. Oh. Yep.
Yeah. So.
I don't have one.
Yes. Yeah, all Apple all the time. Yep. Phone, tablet, two laptops, watch, all of it. Yep.
Yep.
And there's probably a couple of iPods in a drawer somewhere too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Had an iPod ages ago.
Yeah. Yeah, they don't work anymore, but whatever. So, okay, well, all right, we got that. Yeah, I'm an Apple addict. Yep. All right, so we have Michelle. We get to look at her artwork, embroidery. Embroidery kept you from coming apart, basically.
Basically.
Yeah, throughout some trying times, and now really just creating your art as you go there, right?
Yeah. So I picked up, I was always an artist. I did a lot of mixed media. I did a lot of paper arts, like really fine paper with X-Acto blades and glue. And I went to grad school. I came to New Haven, to Connecticut, to go to Yale for grad school, and got rid of all my art stuff and thought that I was just going to focus on school, and wound up being really, really unhappy, and lots of mental health illness stuff in my family, depression, anxiety. Everybody is an alcoholic. I was talking to my mother about it yesterday, actually, over text. We just have a family full of alcoholics, and grad school was bad for my depression and for drinking. And right before I finished my dissertation, I had a friend give me a cross stitch kit, and I loved it. And I was just kind of like looking for things to keep my hands busy, and started embroidering almost immediately. And at the same time, I wound up finally getting sober. So I've been sober for 7 years. So that was 7.5 years ago almost that I started doing needle arts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so cool. We've had so many conversations about the power of needlework in helping people calm down, deal with stress, and so on and so forth. And you're the this isn't going to come out right, but you're the most extreme example. But it's just it's so illustrative of how powerful a needle and thread is in terms of mental health.
It really is. And so I think like on social media especially, there's a lot of circles of like, how can you take care of yourself in 2022 and the world being what it is. And there are a lot of jokes about like crafting or doing yoga and how that's not enough. But honestly, most people I know who have some kind of mental health illness or sickness or whatever, or some other stress or anxiety, almost everybody I know does do those things. They're very calming and meditative, and repetitive actions are just so good for me, at least, and for a lot of other people.
Yeah.
And you get to just live inside your peace the same way people read to escape.
Yeah.
It's really no different.
Have you directly helped others, your embroidery, gotten other people to use it to at least get the blood pressure down?
Yeah, definitely. So at Yale a couple years ago, they had me do like a embroidery workshop, and they do
Oh,
some of those sort of fun things for the students during really high stress times when exams are going on, and when people feel like they can't possibly take a do anything else. Those are really the times when it's the most important that you take a minute and you do something else.
mm-hmm.
Um, so I've done stuff like that. I teach, and I've done some embroidery workshops at our local makerspace, Make Haven. Um, and just in general, I think the online community is so rich. As you know, here we are,
Yeah,
nothing,
right. Yeah.
despite living in the same within 12 miles of each other. Yeah, here we are, never having met in person, but we're in this virtual world together. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's so neat because I've wondered many times if when I was in school, if I'd had needlework. Number one, it would have been extremely weird as a guy, but
Yeah.
in a guy's dorm, that would have been really, yeah. But I've wondered if I had that kind of a thing, if college, if I'd have done better. I mean, I did fine, but if I'd done better just by having that diversion, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. And that's why, in classes or meetings or whatever else, I have there's a um, manager at Yale where I work now, who knits during all her meetings, and she's pretty high up. And I think that's really important because I need to keep my hands busy during these endless Zoom meetings that I'm on, or I get really, really distracted, and that's just not good for my productivity as far as they're concerned. So
Right,
it
right.
actually is better for them if they let me do something else while I'm supposed to be doing something. I'm much more present if my hands are busy.
Yeah.
I can't watch TV without, embroidering. Like,
Yeah,
does anybody
yeah.
watch TV without doing?
No,
No.
no. Got it. Well, that's good that somebody at a higher level is saying this is okay.
Yeah. And she's someone who she has some neuro atypical kids who are extremely high performing, like mathematician
Oh,
sons, who went to college when they were just young prodigies, really. And I think she really understands that all of our brains are not wired the same way, and we are the best judges of the things that we need to keep ourselves well. So
yeah,
it's pretty great.
yeah. It's pretty cool that it's such an old hobby or art form. Really, it's
Yeah,
not shouldn't use the word hobby, but art form still today has that kind of power. It's really cool. Yeah.
definitely.
Yep. All right. I think. All right. We got to get going here. We're going to run out of
Oh,
time. I know we're going to run out of time.
going here.
Yeah. All right. Now, this is we didn't when we did the podcast. I was kind of frustrated when we got done because I really wanted to talk more about this album cover that you
Absolutely.
did, and I really wanted to explore it, but we just ran out of time. It was too much.
Yeah,
So
I'm a talker.
That's okay. It was easy to interview you, so don't apologize. What talk about this the art piece? Who is the artist, and tell us the story behind this. But the piece, the little elements that are in there.
Sure. So I was actually Googling the emails from this piece earlier today to kind of remind myself of the history of it. This is Keb Mo. He's a musician, blues and Americana folk musician. And I had done a piece on Instagram in 2017 where I requested each day that someone who follows me suggests like a thing that I would add to the piece. And I did it every day for the entire year. So at the end of the year, I had a piece, a big hoop that was 365 submissions from the embroidery world and just people who followed me. They weren't necessarily needle workers themselves. And the person who was basically an art agent looking for cover art for Keb Mo's album, this album here, which is called Oklahoma. She had seen that and she called me out of the blue, really, and was like, "Hi, we're looking to commission artwork for Keb Mo's next album cover, and we were really interested in that piece." And I had sold it at that point already to someone who lived in like Canada on like the other coast, like the West Coast. I'm on the East Coast. And I was like, I don't even think I have very good photos of it that you could use. I mean, they're good for me and my website maybe, but not for something like this. So she said, okay, let me get back to you. And she contacted his wife, Robbie, who does a lot of his management stuff. And they said, well, could you put together a piece? Could you replicate that? And I was like, they need it in like 2 weeks. I mean, it was, it was a lot. And so because I don't know how to say no, I said, sure. And they were on a plane and they landed the plane and they sent me a list of all the things that were meaningful to Keb. And these are all the things that they asked for. So I did these. I didn't make them in the arrangement as you see here. I was like, they really wanted his photograph put in front of this piece, so I did all of the elements. I kind of arranged them so a little bit so that they would be able to not look completely photoshopped, like based on how I embroidered them. But I did send them like in little batches, and they kind of photoshopped them together. So I
Okay.
still have no. They have the original pieces. I didn't keep those, but they have them in batches, so it didn't really look like this. But I did include like a couple of little things. I'm not sure you can see it on this one, but like on the full one, there's like a little can of orange crush. So I added a couple things that were for my family and my friends and the people in my life too, and they didn't object and they let them stay on. And this is what it happened. And then it wound up being on like socks, and they had a giant. They had this blown up at when he went on tour for this album so that people could stand like him in front of the art.
Oh,
Oh,
really?
So
that's
yeah, it
cool.
was really cool. Yeah. So
That's
it kind of took on
fun.
a life of its own. And people who thought that I was just a hobbyist, suddenly, I had people in my life being like, wow, I went on Amazon today, or I went on iTunes, and like I'm seeing your artwork everywhere. So it was pretty wild. And I think I mentioned this in the
Wow.
podcast too. They let me keep this sounds like they let me keep, but I stitched my signature in the corner and that's visible on the full album cover. And they also very prominently put my name on the back, like on the piece that I had done the embroidery. And yes, artists should be credited for their work, but most of the time with album art, you have to really go looking to find out who did it. And they really did do me right by that, by really making sure that my name was prominent on it. So it was a
Yeah,
great
yeah,
experience.
yeah. We did talk about that.
That's awesome.
That was really classy of them because
Yeah, it
yeah,
was. Yeah.
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 Okay, so
That
that
little
helped.
dog, the little dog up
Oh,
at the
that's his
top
dog
by his
Rudy.
hat, that looks
Yeah,
just like my Sophie.
that's their dog Rudy.
Oh, so cute.
They sent me a
Did they
picture of
tell
Rudy and they were like, yeah.
Oh, did they tell you what kind it was?
Yeah, they sent me a picture of Rudy and they said, "Can you do a little Rudy?" And I was like, "Of course."
Oh, it looks just like my Sophie.
Yep.
So cute.
So this helps me understand now why, because I mean, obviously they could give you the picture and have you stitch around it, but everything's radiating out or radiating in, however you view
Yeah.
it. So they were getting chunks, like a quarter of the total piece at a
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, I did not have much time to do it. Like I said, they had this super fast turnaround time, which makes me think they had somebody else who like bailed on them, but who knows? And so I was actually at a conference for work, and I was like trying to stitch around the clock basically when I
Oh
wasn't in
no.
the and like overnight mailing them sections of it so they could like Photoshop and kind of start playing around with it. There's a real short time. I think they asked me to do it in like March, and then the album came out on June 14th, which is my
Oh
birthday.
wow.
Wow,
I
that
came out
is
on your
fast.
birthday.
Yeah, it was really nice.
Oh
Oh,
wow.
fun.
Oh. Now this won a Grammy. So did you get to
I
attend
did not.
anything? No.
No. It was we for a moment, my wife and I were like, "Oh my God, they're gonna like, I'm gonna get to go no,
Oh, that would have been way over the top, wouldn't it? That would have been so
a little
cool.
bit.
Then it's yeah. Then what do we wear? Yeah.
Yeah, I know what I'd wear. That's not the
Uh,
problem.
so so there's even the background. So I wanted to ask you about the ridged background. So then that they photoshopped that in then.
No, so I actually did it on, what I found with some of the like what I like, which a lot of people hate, is that I tend to really enjoy stitching on things that have some stretch, that have like some spandex in them.
Oh.
Um, or embroidery because it tends to pucker pretty easily, even linen or something that's not super thick. And so when I embroider on something with a little bit of stretch to it, it tends to not pucker as much around the edges.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, so it's really useful for that when I'm doing small things that are really, really heavily worked with a lot of detail. It just works better for me. So it was on some kind of fabric that I had, but you can tell, like when you really blow it in, you can see
Yeah, I
they didn't do
just
a
noticed right
great
there.
job. Yeah, yeah. When you
Right,
really start looking, you can see right where they
right
kind
in
of
there. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Jeez, blow up my spot, Gary.
No, it's
No, no,
because
I'm
how do you get this stuff together and then to do it in pieces like that
yeah.
and but I mean, where it's pieced together where you can see it if you know to look for it, but even then it really doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't. And the
Oh.
piece that I had done originally was just all at once, of course. I had started with one thing in the middle and I just kept building around it. So it was the same idea, but I had a year to do it and it was organic and it just kind of
Hmm.
developed on its own. So
But then to get it used in merch and everything, wow, that's cool.
yeah, we still have a pair of socks that are very highly faded that have these little images on them.
Uh,
Yeah.
what an experience. Hope you get to do another one.
Me too. I'm always like, anybody wants to commission me for album artwork, I am here. I'll do anything you want. It's so fun to see it in that format.
Uh, Dee Neely is asking how big was it? For,
So because there were little pieces, I would say that if I were to smaller than an LP, larger than a CD, if you were to put them all together, like
okay.
true to size, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Wow, what a cool experience. Even if you did have to do all-nighters to get it done.
Oh
Very
yeah,
cool.
no, it was totally worth it.
Yeah. All right. And keeping with the music theme. Now, okay, so I was asking you ahead of time about your radio show. So people who
Yeah.
want to listen to your radio show, tell them when it third you do it, not
Third
me.
Friday, sure. So I have a music program. It's called Love and Communication, which sounds like a talk show, but it's not. It's named after a song that I really love, and it is every third Friday, and it's late, so it is 10:30 p.m. till 2 a.m. East Coast time. And it is on WPKN 89.5 FM out of Bridgeport, Connecticut, serving Litchfield, Fairfield, and Suffolk County in
She
Newton
has it
County,
down.
Connecticut, Suffolk County, and yes, in New
She
York.
has it down, the whole spiel.
I do usually. That was a little embarrassing. And so I have a radio show. I play whatever I want. It's late at night, and then it does go up on the archive for the radio station, and it's up for a couple weeks. So music is just. I mean, it's nice that you started with the Keb Mo album because so much of my stuff just winds up being music related one way or another. I was raised on classic rock. My dad and my mom graduated. They had me young. They graduated from high school in 76. And classic rock was just like the soundtrack to my youth. And should I keep talking about this piece?
You bet.
Okay.
The
So
Boston
my
album, I'm telling
yeah,
you. Oh,
Boston album.
what a
So
classic. What a classic.
my dad, he passed away in 2003. He was only 45, and he passed away. He had epilepsy and had a seizure in his sleep. And I was 22, 23 at the time. And I, was devastated. He was a really great dad. And one of the things that I do, not every year, but usually every year around the anniversary of him passing away, I usually do like a small piece that's just a little memory memorial piece for him. And for whatever reason, for years, I had been looking at this old beat up LP, the Boston album of his that I still had. And I thought, I'm going to try to do that. So I did. And of course, it took way longer than I wanted it to. And I was like, oh, get it done by the anniversary. And I think I squeezed it out. But this was that piece. And it was so fun to do. The perspective is off. Like, I don't think I really realized that these are guitars that are also spaceships until I started actually embroidering it. And the fretboard in the piece itself, the perspective is not very good. Like, the person who drew this the first time around also just didn't do a very good job. And that is replicated in this. The perspective is off when you look at the album cover a little bit. It's kind of funny. But this was just so much fun to make. It's still probably one of my favorite pieces that I've done.
Yeah, and until we did the podcast, I didn't realize those were guitars either. And then
Yeah.
after we got done, first I put "Funeral for a Friend" on, and then I went and looked at that, and wow, they are guitars.
Yeah, they're guitars. Yeah. And there's more, I think, in the actual album. I think there might be like a couple littler, smaller ones too. But you do what you can.
I should have never sold mine. I should have never sold it. Yeah, cool. All right. Next one.
Oh,
Just a minute.
your little.
Yeah, there we
Oh,
go.
there you go. Yeah. Another music piece. So I started getting into these bigger, like, basically what happens is I got like a Q snap frame. And so I started exploring the square instead of the circle. And that changed a lot for me. And I had done a piece for my dad. That was the first one I had done. And it was just different elements, things that reminded me of him and from my childhood. And so then I decided to do one of my mom. And as I said, my parents were young when they had me. They weren't teenagers, but basically. And I did like a family album really of these pieces. So there's one of my father, this one is of my mom. I did one of my brother and I, and then I did one of my son last year, which he has now, which I gave to him. He'll be 23 in a month. And this is my mom dressed in a costume from one of my dance recitals when I was younger. She had a wolf dog. Faith by George Michael was a really important song for us. It was a very good memory of listening to that in the 80s in the bathroom, getting ready for work and school in the morning. She was she is, she doesn't ride her motorcycle anymore, but she was a Harley Davidson babe, biker babe. And so I kind of did a piece that was about that, but also not, I just really enjoy color and shape and kind of just playing with organic shapes and color, especially. Yeah.
So when you put, like, you have several of these kinds of designs, do you start with well, I mean, obviously the faith part, but did you say, all right, I got to put mom here and in my costume? I mean, how do you compose this?
So yeah, so this kind of started from a series of photographs. The one that I had done of my dad, I knew I wanted to do. He was in a hula skirt costume, standing with like the Hawaiian shirt open, bare chested with a hula skirt on for Halloween. And I just thought it was funny.
Yeah.
And then I found this photo. I was like, oh, it's my mom in costume. And then I found another photo that I liked of my little brother and I, and we were in costume. And I was just like, we're not that, it's not like we play dress up all the time, but for whatever reason, the photos I was gravitating to were all photos of our family in costume. And I have a little bit of a like my childhood wasn't, in some ways it was wonderful. I had two parents who loved me, and I think that's really the most important thing for any kid. In other ways, it was really tough. My mom was, once she and my dad divorced, she was in a lot of really abusive relationships, and she has a lot of mental health stuff. Everybody's an alcoholic, as I mentioned. And so there was just like some domestic violence and chaos and things that my brother and I were sort of embedded in. And I kind of started thinking about the ways that it was strange that I was gravitating towards these photos of our family in costumes, which are really like ways to mask what's really happening.
Uh-huh.
Costumes are a performance of you being something other than you are, or a way to sort of escape the reality of whatever your life is. And really subconsciously, I think I was drawn to those photos. And so these are sort of dreamscapes, imagining like the best and the worst of those worlds growing up. But at the end, I think they're like really joyous. Like I was loved, and you can't really put a price tag on that, or like chalk that up against the mistakes people make. I mean, I
Yeah.
have not been a perfect mother, and most people aren't perfect parents. And but if you love your kids, that tends to be enough. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So these helped you work through some mental things too then, just doing
always.
these. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I really appreciate that traditionally samplers, and if you look at like 19th century mourning pieces and hair jewelry and all the sort of Victorian um, ways of memorializing and or telling stories, tapestries about our histories. I don't I love that, and that's really where I go with my work for the most part. But I don't think it has to be necessarily in the same form. It doesn't need to look like, traditional in order to still be participating in that tradition.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's yeah, to someone who doesn't even know any of the stories behind it, it's just a fun piece of art to explore visually.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. And that's my like um, you know, maybe you don't know. I have a sense of myself as someone who is have a lot of energy. I always have to keep busy. I am somewhat of an extrovert, and I felt very much growing up and throughout my 20s and my 30s like there was just too much, like I was a little too much, and that it could be overwhelming. And that comes out in my art for sure. Like you cannot give me enough color. Like
Yeah.
trying I try to like tone things down. I try to subdue things. Forget it. It doesn't
Just
feel
not in,
authentic. It doesn't look authentic. Yeah.
just not in you. Yeah.
Not
Okay.
me.
Yep. Well, this is one that I have to say I have sat and looked at for not not for hours, but certainly for several minutes, just because it's just fun to explore. There's so much movement and shape and color in this, and it's just fun to explore. So
Thank you.
yeah.
Yeah, and I
Hmm.
think that's good for people too to have an in. Sometimes there's people will be overwhelmed or intimidated by art, and so I always want people to feel like they can look at something for a long time. And needlework, I think, is great for that. People get really engaged with the process, even if they don't understand the meaning, and I love that.
Yeah. Yep. All right. This one. Now, it's interesting because when I was selecting the photos to talk with Michelle about, I wanted this in, but then I wanted something else, and it was going to be just too many. And then she comes back and asks if we can't have this one in, and absolutely, because I want to know what the story behind this one.
Yeah, yeah. So there isn't as much. The story with this is it's atypical to what I generally do while still being like in the same kind of color scheme, or palettes and a lot of different kinds of details. Um, and so I made this, oh gosh, I don't remember, a few years ago. And there's an illustrator and graphic artist named Lisa Congdon, and she has a pretty big following. She's kind of one of those people where you're starting to see her stuff in like TJ Maxx and all that. But for a while, she was a little bit more less famous, I guess. And she posted a piece about spades and they are apparently a symbol of winter and old age and transformation. And I loved that. I didn't know that about the spade, and I'm struggling now even to remember all the symbolism of what she talked about when she was posting the spade piece. So I knew I wanted to make a spade, and so each of the elements in this piece are based on different 18th and 19th century embroideries. So I have a lot of reference books, and I was kind of just plowing through all of these reference books around historic embroideries and took pieces, colors and motifs from those and did them in this piece. And I was, thinking, I believe at the time, like it was another, like, what does it mean to be getting older? What does it mean to work through our, especially if you're like an old crone or whatever. I sort of, even though I'm married, I'm a lesbian. And so um, people, feel their feelings about that. But like, what does it mean to be an old crone who takes the wisdom of her life and transforms it into something really powerful? And so I love this piece. I think it is about a foot tall, maybe.
Oh my.
Wow.
Yeah, it's about a foot tall. It's pretty big.
I didn't know that. I never knew where the spade came from. I didn't know there was. I mean, there's obviously there should be a
Yeah.
story behind it, but wow.
Yeah, all the different symbols, clubs and hearts and diamonds and cards and stuff. I think we just kind of assume that they're just card suits, but I think it's probably from a spade and like the earth and hoeing it and planting something and the sort of old wives' tales around just greenery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a neat thing because a lot of designers will do hearts, and
Yeah.
there's thousands of
Yeah.
heart designs, but
Yeah.
this is the first time I've seen a spade, and what a great shape
Yeah.
to
It's an
work
upside down
in.
heart with a handle.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Learning things.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. I like it a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. A brief history of how music
Oh,
made me queer.
yeah.
There's so much fun in this thing.
It's sadly that's I know it's hard for people to see. I just finished this in September. Yeah. So this is up in Maine. I grew up in Maine, and there's a gallery in Portland called Speedwell Projects, and they are doing a show through the rest of the fall. It's called Can't Take My Eyes Off You, and it is being sponsored and partially funded by this place called the Crew Foundation. And um, Bob Crew, I believe his name was the guy who wrote "Can't Take My Eyes Off From You," the song, and he wrote a bunch of songs for Frankie Valli in the Four Seasons. And he was gay and closeted back then, and so the sort of the governing, like, organizational idea behind the show was that all the artists in it would do some kind of piece that's related to, like, code switching or taking things that seem straight or heterosexual and how, like, we make sense of them as gay people. So I had already started this piece barely when they reached out to me about it. That was a couple years ago, and so it is a history of, from birth all the way up till now, of all the songs and music, pop music, that I listened to as a kid and then later on in my life. And even if they were quote unquote straight songs, like straight romantic songs, when you're gay, you have to like recode everything to speak to you and your like desires and your relationships. And so that's what this piece is about. Um, I I had so much fun making it. There is a key on my website where I list like what all the songs are and then what the image is in this piece, because you wouldn't know by looking at lots of them.
Yeah.
Lots of them are just bits of pieces from lyrics. Some of them are like explicit. It's not, for kids, but I don't feel like it needs to be. Everything doesn't need to be for kids.
Right.
Um, and yeah, and so every single piece in here has to do with a song. And Gary, earlier you mentioned Yellow Funeral for a Friend, and that's from this piece from towards the beginning, the Yellow Brick Road, with the RIP. That was one of my very
Oh.
first favorite songs.
Oh, well
Uh,
played. Oh, well played.
yeah. So
Oh,
that's on there.
I didn't notice that.
Oh
Outstanding.
yeah. Yeah, all of everything on I have a playlist on Spotify too that is like all 200 something songs in here. George Michael, Michael
That's him
Jackson was
there,
so
right?
thriller. Oh yes,
Yeah.
father figure, loved it.
Janice.
Janis Joplin is there. That's Cyndi Lauper.
That's
Yeah,
Cindy. Okay.
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, Lord, won't you buy me a Mercedes Benz? So then I went
yeah,
right to okay.
yeah.
MTV when they actually played music videos.
I
Yeah.
Yeah,
know.
so MTV, some of these weren't songs. Like Sassy Magazine was this magazine that I was obsessed with as a teenager. That was a little bit like a feminist teen magazine, and it was amazing. And it didn't last long enough, but it taught me so much about music. I got all my music recs from there. Rocky Horror Picture Show is in there, and then Rolling Stone songs and Dire Straits songs, a lot of classic rock and a lot of indie rock, a lot of pop music.
Yeah. I was just listening to a Dire Straits concert yesterday. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
That guy can play guitar. Um,
Yes, he
when you put this together, was this just songs come to you and you make a note and create a thing, or did
was kind
you?
of
Okay.
so I made a list first of what I thought I was going to put in, and whenever I do a piece, I use these little, the water erasable pens, um, or this kind, the two, and I had it it's in a big quilting hoop, so it is the size of a quilting hoop, and I kind of sketched it out, like very brief, just like kind of placement more than anything.
Hmm.
Um, and but when you're working on something this big for that long, the water erasable marker, even it just starts to fade. Even if it's a little piece, it works fine, but not on a big piece. And it started to fade, and more songs would come to me. So like I would be like, oh my gosh, I have to add this song, and then you're running out of space, and you're just kind of like cramming everything in there. There wasn't a lot of editing that happened of that list. It was like if it came to me and I realized that it was something I loved, I tried to put it on there. Although now I'm horrified at the unintentional pieces that I missed.
Yeah.
The song
Yeah.
I missed. Oh no, I didn't put that song on. Oh, it's just incomplete. But
Yeah. This is the kind of thing where the piece of cloth you start with is probably never big enough.
it's not.
Yeah.
No, no.
You have to do a part two.
I already, if you don't think I already have that list where I'm like, my little PS at the bottom, just
Yeah.
hanging off the end.
Oh man. What else we
Yeah.
got down here?
We have, oh my gosh. So there's a couple REM songs in there and Cure songs and Modest Mouse and Leonard Cohen and Bob Dylan. American Thighs by AC/DC. Shook Me All Night Long, rather, is the actual name of that song. I've got a little Melissa Etheridge in there. I put Kiefer Sutherland from The Lost Boys. That's the blonde mulleted vampire.
Uh-huh.
I
Oh.
was obsessed with that movie as a teenager, and the music in that movie, Cry Little Sister. Madonna with the Burning Cross and Elvis Costello. So the playlist is online. There's just so much in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does Melissa? I used to listen to Melissa Etheridge a lot. I just love her voice. And is she still recording?
Yes.
Okay.
I
Because
don't
she had some
follow
health
her
issues
like
at
I
some
used
point.
to. Yeah. She was just on the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills.
Oh, really?
Doing like some kind of private, yeah, like they paid her to come and like sing a song for some benefit or something. And I know that because I watched that show and I'm unashamed.
Because I knew I know that she has some cruise because a guitarist I follow, Christy Lene, and you might want to check her out.
Yeah.
I follow her. Uh, long story how that happened. Anyway. I won't bore you with it, but anyway, she got selected to go on the Melissa Etheridge cruise and perform, and so I knew she was still involved in in
Yeah.
public life, but I knew she also had some health problems. I just love her voice.
Yeah, she does still sing for sure. Yeah, I just haven't followed like any recent releases or music that she might have put out. I don't think. Although I hear stuff all the time and I don't even realize what I'm hearing. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, we're going to get bogged down in music, so we got to move
Yep.
along. Okay, now in your website, you have a whole section from home in Maine. And I love those pieces. And this one just screamed at me because my grandma used to make doilies all the time.
Yeah.
She had them everywhere. And they all had this, the plain solid center circle. And then
Yep.
for you to put that in there, it was like, oh, thank you. Perfect.
So my great grandmother Rose, Rose Richards, she was my mom's mother's mother. She made this, and I got a bag of textiles and doilies and different things that she crocheted, and this was one of them. And this is old. When you put this, I was like, wow, I haven't even looked at this for a while. So her name was Rose, and she actually worked in the textile mills as a spinner in. Well, this wasn't 19th century or anything. This was in the like 40s and 50s up in Maine in Westbrook, which is a big mill town. And most of my family grew up in mill towns. So I have her spinning hook. I probably have it behind me in this mess somewhere. Just a hook that she used in the factories. And she also just was constantly knitting, like I have mittens and you name it. So I made this piece when my mom was like, "Do you want this bag of textiles?" I was like, yes. I don't think she used the word textiles. But yeah. And there's a lot of, I think, fiber artists who just try to make use of these beautiful objects that our ancestors made that just don't get appreciated as art. And so the rose for her name, because her name was Rose, was really in homage to her.
It's
Yeah.
very cool. Yeah. Because it immediately reminded, when my grandparents left their house and I was in college. So the moving out was handled by my dad, and absolutely zero appreciation for this kind of stuff. So I'm sure
Yeah,
the hundreds of doilies she made just went in the trash. And,
totally. Yeah.
Oh,
There was a project, Shannon, oh my gosh, what's her last name? She does Badass Cross Stitch. Have you had her on this show?
oh, yeah,
Um,
I've tried. Haven't been
yeah.
able to get her. Yeah.
So she found a quilt that was like embroidered squares that this woman Rita had started, and it was just in a bag. She never finished it, and she found it at an estate sale, but Rita had actually embroidered the center like US map piece, and then she sort of crowdsourced online people to do a square each, and then someone quilted it together, and it kind of travels the US. And I did the main square for that, which is like it's the outline of the state and then the bird and the flower. So it's the chickadee and the pine cone and tassel. And I love that project. Just she was at a garage sale, and the family, I think, got a little bit touchy about the story because she was like, I found this at a yard sale and nobody cares about it. And then it got a lot of attention. And I
Oh,
kind of sad for the family because people are like, how could they throw it away? And I'm like, well, people do,
yeah.
like, but I was really glad it was saved and then
Yeah.
it was
Well,
finished.
at
Yeah.
some point, there's a limit to how much old stuff you can keep. But,
yeah.
this is just an excellent example of old stuff repurposed and renewed. And yeah, just very cool. Okay.
Thank you.
And this one, I don't know if it's the gray background. I don't know what it is. I just love this. And when I, was in the section from Maine, it just said
Yeah.
New England woods to me.
Yeah. So I had a friend who she was going through a really bad breakup, and I had gone through a really bad breakup, and this is another older piece. And I was at her house in Portland, Maine, on her back porch, and she had like a bouquet of flowers that was like complete it wasn't squished between two things, but it might as well have been. It was like flat and dried out, and I took a picture of it because it was just so beautiful. And I was like, I'm going to embroider that, and it'll be impossible to get like the flatness, but I was kind of going for like I didn't need it to have a lot of depth to it
Uh-huh.
because it was wilted, right? Like and sort of dried a little bit. So I was kind of going for that, and it was just on this like gray, I don't know, table that she had on her back porch. I have a photo of it next to it. too that I grabbed tonight from when we were talking about it, but I don't think I can show it right now. But yeah, it was just so beautiful, and it just reminded me of home. Like so many of
Yeah.
these things do. A real
Yeah.
soft spot for my home state and nature. So
Yeah, I just love it. And the composition where you gave us a little space there to the left, just to,
yeah,
yeah, it's just beautiful.
thank you.
And
No,
those spring-loaded metal hoops.
yes.
You
Um,
have a collection of those because you have them on several of your pieces.
well, I don't want to give away my secrets, but
Well, then
eBay is a
don't.
great source for cheap, lots of vintage hoops. So I'll go on eBay and just buy, vintage hoops because I just think they have so much more character, and I love that they're being used and put to use, and they're not coming from a factory. I mean, I'll use whatever I can get my hands on, but they're so interesting, and so many of them are busted up or they have tape around them, and they were just used, and that's awesome. Like, how
Yeah.
often do you get to have not just the repurposed stuff that I try to use frequently in the piece itself, but the hoop too. I really love knowing that it's been through so many people's hands.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're just really cool. Yeah, and I like you incorporated them. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, now your eyes. We have several of your eyes. Oh, here, Nooper. I'm sorry, Nooper. I missed that. Spades used in Indian and Eastern embroideries. See, and that's an area where I got to get some guests. Okay, that
Yeah.
helps me.
Yes, and that would make sense with the time frame too, like pulling these things from the 18th and 19th century US or British, like all of the sort of imperial and colonial trips around the world, and that that our traditions were pulling from these other like historic traditions too, and motifs for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Nooper. Okay, now several eyes here, and because they're fun. I think they're fun.
They're fun. This one I called it Zoom fatigue. This was one that I did right as COVID hit, and I worked in higher ed, and it was just like my eyes are bleeding all the time, and it's just, oh my god. Um, that's basically what it felt like to be working in higher ed during the pandemic. Yeah. I
Jeez.
mean,
Oh,
so
that's so good. That's so good. Okay. Oh man.
I
But
wish there
now,
was more to it than that, but it was just fun, and yeah, and silly, and also but still, like, I don't know, of a moment.
yeah. Now that I know the title, it really
Yeah.
brings. But now, lots of beads in these things.
Yeah, so I did not bead early on. I mean, I don't know what early on's in it is really. I've only been doing this for 7 years, but at first I never used beads really, and then I just kept admiring things that had beads. And you know how it is, once you start adding something, then suddenly you need a whole room just for your beads.
Yeah.
So I was a little loath to get involved in needing to buy beads all the time, but too late. And I love the texture that it gives to a piece. I love the shine, like that the way that light plays off from something that's already as worked and textural as embroidery, and then to add the beads to it, I love beading. I find it goes faster than embroidering. I don't bead like a whole string and then lay them down. I actually bead like every single bead one at a time with like a back stitch,
Uh-huh.
just because I feel like it gives me a lot more control over where it goes. But I rarely do a piece now without beads. I don't remember the last piece I did that didn't have beads. That was embroidery. I don't think I've done one in probably a couple of years. Yeah.
Zoom fatigue. So
Yeah.
funny. So funny and so true.
Oh,
Yeah.
it was a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. And here,
Same thing with this one. Yeah, just like I did more as much beading in this as I did embroidery, I think. And then some metallic thread, which is so hard to work with. But again, I just love the texture that it gives. And I don't know, the beading just felt it gives a different way of creating organic shapes. They don't have to really mean anything. I just like the possibilities that they give me.
now on felt, it looks like it's a felt
Yeah.
ground.
Yeah, sometimes I work on felt. I'll work on anything. Honestly, I use a lot of scrap stuff, and this was a metal hoop too. I like felt for smaller pieces. I don't think I would ever do a big piece on it. It takes the thread really well, and it almost like cushions it. What's the word I'm looking for? Where um, it's almost like there's something under it. You know what I mean? When you when you embroider
Padding?
over. Yeah, yeah.
Padding?
It's like, yeah, it gives it a extra dimension. It just kind of puffs it out a little bit more than than when I'm embroidering on something flatter. And so that's fun. It creates a bigger discrepancy between the surface and the plane of the piece.
And then in
It's
the
very
eye
forgiving.
is this just a piece of cloth you put in in the
Yes,
eye?
I applicate like a piece of cloth in there, which I don't do very often either, but have been kind of playing with a little bit more.
Well, it's
Yeah,
just so fun. There's so much going on in these things that if you get in and study them, there's just a lot. But the felt just adds a nice extra texture rather than just being, flat background.
definitely. And I often like even though I don't use a lot of felt. I do often tell people who are really new like to give it a shot on felt. If they're using more than 2 strands of floss, like if they're using all 6 strands, um, because I think it kind of disappears into the felt if you're not used to how it works. But if you're just using like a full strand of embroidery floss or beads or anything like that, it's so forgiving. Like you really can get away with a lot on felt.
Now, are you just going to Joann's and just getting the cheap felt, or are you buying
This was
serious felt?
this was just a square of felt, that I probably got at Joann's or
Yeah.
somewhere. I don't remember where I got it, but I remember I had a couple of colors that just showed up in my bin, and I was like, great.
Because I know, like everything, there's serious felt that you can spend a fortune on, and
Yeah, yeah.
um, yeah. Now, D Neely asking, you don't sign your work
So
always.
sometimes, yeah. So I will sometimes sign them on the back inside the hoop. I have a lot of these like metallic markers, which I've started to sign things with on the back, in the hoop. I leave the backs open. I don't finish off the backs because I am a total mess and I love it. I think it's fun to see how you could have something that is so absolutely nonsensical on the back and yet like the front looks nice and clean. It's still a mystery to me why that happens. Like,
Yeah.
why is it so messy on the back? But I leave the backs open and I usually sign them on the inside of the back of the hoop.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Oh, and I forgot. You gave us a close up so we could get right in on this one.
Yeah, I was just trying to get in there a little bit with but I think you got it in the other one, really.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay.
So these is yeah, the progression of my eyes. These are earlier ones. These I did on that one I did on velvet, and I think the other one you have is on corduroy. Again, I just like playing with different textures of backgrounds, and I don't really draw things out when they're smaller pieces like this. I just kind of wing it. So there's no real need for me to draw the design on a piece of velvet. Um, Velvet's way less forgiving than felt. You can see every little puncture mark and
Yep.
it pulls it in, and there's so many fibers that are standing up as you're trying to thread over it. But I like how quickly like your skills in embroidery and needlework can develop. Like to me, as I look back over some of these, I'm like, wow, it wasn't that long ago, but it just feels like a long time ago. And this I did a series of eyes based on something called the Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows, and I went back and looked, and this one is for anchorage was the word. Um, and the definition says the desire to hold on to time as it passes, like trying to keep your grip on a rock in the middle of a river, feeling the weight of the current against your chest while your elders float on downstream, calling over the roar of the rapids, just let go, it's okay, let go. And so I was picking these words that I just thought were really beautiful and developing these eyes based on them.
Hmm. Yeah. It's neat.
And be
Yeah. Well, and that this one up here with the cracks in it is, I don't know what it is about it, but it's like it's the perfect bead for that spot.
well, I love that you look this closely. It means a lot to me actually to be talking with someone who really spends that much time looking. because I think people just kind of like, oh, that's cool, but they don't really look. And there's so much in needlework that rewards a really close look.
Yeah, no, that bead right there. Yep. Okay. And so this one's corduroy.
Yes,
now
that was
I
on.
see it. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, so I did that on corduroy. I have a ton of corduroy. I don't know where I got it. It's like I need to make some pants. Like I'm not going to be able to embroider all of the corduroy. And this was another one. The word, I think it's a fake word. It's called Y tie. And it's the definition the guy came up with for this was a feature of modern society that suddenly strikes you as absurd and grotesque. From zoos and milk drinking to organ transplants, life insurance and fiction, part of the faint background noise of absurdity that reverberates from the moment our ancestors first crawled out of the slime, but could not for the life of them remember what they got up to do. So I don't know if I captured all of that in this, but I was definitely looking for something like, you see these dinosaur, sort of primitive, ancient landscapes with the greenery and the primordial ooze. What are we doing here?
Yeah. So much fun on corduroy. See, that's the other thing. We're always chasing, the best linen and whatever, and you just grab some corduroy or some velvet and.
It was really important to me when I started doing this. My son was a teenager. I was a graduate student. I had no money. I don't have the money for an expensive hobby or art. Like embroidery floss and fabric and a needle is about as like inexpensive as you're going to get. You don't need a lot of tools to really get started.
Right.
And that is so important to me. To keep it like accessible financially to other people too when you're teaching workshops and you're like, you don't need to have all this fancy stuff. It's great. Do I spend too much on the materials? You bet. But like you don't actually need it.
Right. But see, but it's so illustrative that these other, like just the ground cloths alone can add so much. I mean, just a cheap piece of felt from Joann's can add so much to that piece that, we don't, I mean, look at what it does for that piece. And, you don't think about it because we're always chasing, the best linen we get our hands on.
Yeah.
And,
yeah. I love great, nice cloth. And like, I have my favorite stores where I'm buying my threads and my, don't get me wrong. I know the difference in quality between some cheap friendship bracelet embroidery cloth that is dry and sticks and like something nice and glossy that's been dyed like beautifully. But you can still do it.
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, we need to keep that perspective. I think we lose it too often.
Yeah.
I know I do. Guilty. I'm not saying I'm innocent. No, I'm the worst.
None of us are. You can't escape capitalism.
No, you can't. Okay. Now these, what is the section?
I call these queer landscapes. Yeah. So as like a queer woman, I think there's a lot of focus on like gay and queer culture as just being like it's about sex only, and like that's what a lot of people think sometimes, like especially any kind of like right-wing movement will often just think that it's like about perversity, and which sure it is also that, like I don't care, whatever. But I called these queer landscapes because I wanted to like build some kind of abstract imagery of like excessiveness and beauty and like happiness, like pride type thing, without it just always being like it's some dour thing to be ashamed of. And like I don't know, they're just like these interiorities, like my inner personhood is comes out in these pieces. And I almost always do something like really representational, and then I have to do something like this where I'm not trying to make something look like something, and then I go back to something representational, and then I make something really abstract. I just find myself sort of switching from one to the other, like they're kind of palette cleansers.
So when you do these, is there a plan, or is it as it comes out of your head?
It just comes out of my head.
Okay.
I just start with a couple elements and I build and I build and I build, and then I'm looking at what colors and different kinds of stitches and just building in pretty organic way.
Because the colors are just so bright. There's so much texture. There is kind of a flow to it, whether it's intentional or not. To me, there's a visual flow to it, and I just really
definitely
enjoy
start
it.
in the middle and sort of work my way out. Yeah. And I think you put a couple others too.
Oh yeah.
On
You
here,
bet I
but
did.
I love
You bet I did. Right here.
Yeah, this one I did based on the colors of a shirt that I really wanted. It was like a designer shirt, and I sometimes find myself wanting to buy clothes or things for the house or whatever, and I realize that it's really just like the colors that I'm drawn to.
Oh.
So if I can make something using those colors, it sort of taps down the need to consume like mindlessly. And I think that's just like the artist in me, right? Where I'm just like, oh, so it was this shirt and it was these oranges and pinks and I loved it and I was obsessing about it. And it was like $200. And I was like, I'm not buying this shirt. I just made this embroidery instead.
Oh no.
A much saner approach, yes.
Yeah, well, it doesn't always work.
Now, the other ones are a circle, but now in this one you have these lines going out. Is it just
Yeah. That was to cover a boo-boo in the fabric.
excellent?
The fabric got creased. It was like this shiny spandex, and like there was no getting that crease out of it. And it happened like I'm not sure how. And I was like, well, I'm just gonna have to make these like diagonal things coming off it. So one of those is creased under it, and that's the
Bravo.
story.
Bravo. Oh.
Thank you.
What are the metal pieces? There's a couple of metal bits.
Yeah, they're just like jewelry beads. I think maybe there were other pieces too. I was just kind of playing around with whatever I had in
long, really long pieces of bead.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
I know there's so much to see and study. You can just get lost in it for quite a while.
Thanks.
Yeah. That's what's so fun about these. Exactly that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, people really, really love these. I feel like people even who are like, oh, you embroider? Okay. And they don't know the difference between that and like crocheting, like these pieces they get into.
Yeah. No, there's always something new to see in here. Yep. Love them. Yeah. All right. This is the last one.
This is your favorite.
Oh, man. Michelle, I'm telling you.
After I went through all that and was like, oh, I just have these, everything is so multicolored. I went through a period where I was like, I am going to try to do something monochromatic, and still queer because I was watching Gentleman Jack. I don't know if anybody watched that show.
Yes, superb show.
Yeah. And she dresses, she was a 18th century landowner, definite lesbian. She had these secret journals that she wrote in her own secret shorthand code, and there was a show, I think it got canceled. There was only 2 seasons, but I was watching it, and she dresses like a high, like a dapper gentleman, but with like petticoats, and everything is black. She wears black. And so I was like, I'm going to do one of these, but I'm going to do it like Gentleman Jack style, all in black. And I love these. And I have to make more. I said this, Gary, but like, I just kind of jump all over the place. And so when you talked about this with me on the podcast, I was like, I have got to make another black piece.
Yes.
It was so fun and such a challenge, real challenge to like have the reflective surfaces do the work that I'm used to letting different colors do.
Yeah, that's the thing, is all black on black, and yet there's depth, color, texture, all of it. And I mean, it just is so cool what you've pulled off with nothing but black.
Thanks. Thanks. Yeah.
I'm not saying that to suck up to you. I really just think this is just an outstanding piece. It's just, there's so much to it, and I could look at it all day long. I really just like it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a different kind of challenge for sure to have any kind of composition with needlework where it's all in the same color. It's just, but like I love red work, I love black work, I love white work, I love all these historical, sort of monochromatic single color works pieces. And so this was my attempt to do something contemporary with the same kind of idea.
Absolutely nailed it.
Yeah.
Just nailed it.
And it shows that even though it's all technically in black, the textures play off each other, and shiny versus matte, and it actually gives it color where you would think there would be no color.
Yeah. It was a real lesson in beads too, and like what those can add to a piece in terms, like I said before, like having some kind of reflective surface changes things. It makes it hard for photographing too, as we all know, it's impossible. And then you get in person and someone's like, oh my God. And I'm like, oh, what did you think? Like it's a three-dimensional object. It's not flat. So, having that in a photo is really hard.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Just love it.
It's gorgeous.
Yep. All right. That was the last one. All right. Back on camera here. Thanks so much. Oh,
I think I'm like out of, there we go. Yeah. Well, that's been fun. I love talking about this stuff. And like I said, I really appreciate having people look at it that closely.
Yep. Well,
yeah.
Really enjoy the work.
To do.
So, yep.
Get
really
up close.
Okay. So, Michelle, Anais Morgan, mutually assured deconstruction, not construction, deconstruction, is the website. Check her out, follow her. Always something to look at. And this is just the tip of the iceberg for what she has. Absolutely, so much, and so much written material that's interesting, and the radio show. So many things going on, and she's so as a person just incredibly boring. Just. And on top of it all, her wife's a chef, baker.
Yeah, man. It's true. It's gross.
That would be trouble for me.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. Got it all going on. Yep.
Yeah, we have a good time. I'm really enjoying my middle age. My son's an adult, and it's the best time of my life.
Yep. Excellent. All right, Michelle, thanks so much. Thanks to everybody for joining us tonight, and we'll see you next week.
Great. Thanks a lot. Bye.